Let's go Broncos! What if I told you that the Denver Broncos are one step away from making this season unforgettable, and almost no one is talking about it yet? There's a strategy being formed behind the scenes that could change everything faster than we imagine. But before I reveal it, don't forget to like if you truly believe in this team, and leave this comment right now. Go Broncos! I believe we'll go all the way. Now let's get straight into it, because the impact of that Jalen Waddle trade is still sending shockwaves through the league. The more time passes, the clearer it becomes. The Broncos pulled off something that feels like absolute highway robbery. Giving up what's essentially the value of a late first-round pick for a player of that caliber? That's the kind of move that changes everything. And because of that move, the entire draft strategy has shifted. We are now just over a month away from the NFL draft, and the big question every team faces is right in front of Denver. Do you draft the best player available, or do you draft for need? But here's the difference. The Broncos are no longer a team full of holes. In fact, they're being recognized as one of the most complete rosters in the league right now. That completely changes the conversation. Instead of trying to fix weaknesses across the board, Denver can now be precise. And when you look at the roster closely, two positions stand out above the rest: linebacker and tight end. Those are the areas where upgrades would make the biggest impact. Now here's where things get really interesting. Free agency hasn't provided a clear answer at linebacker. There isn't that obvious name sitting out there that makes you say, that's the guy. So naturally, all eyes turn to the draft. And the way this class is shaping up, there is serious depth at the linebacker position, meaning the Broncos don't have to panic or reach early. This opens up a very strategic approach. The expectation internally is that the Broncos will target the best available player, but specifically at a position of need. That balance is key. They're not going to force a pick that doesn't make sense, but they also won't ignore the roster gaps that still exist. And when you start looking at potential fits, the picture becomes even clearer. There are high-upside linebackers projected across multiple rounds in this draft. Some bring elite athleticism and pass-rushing ability, others bring pure tackling instincts and coverage skills. The variety is there, and more importantly, the depth allows Denver to be patient. Because let's be real, the Broncos' current situation at inside linebacker is thin. There are only a couple of reliable options on the roster, and we've already seen how injuries can impact that position over a season. That's not something you want to gamble with, especially if the team is truly trying to contend. So the strategy starts to reveal itself. Use that valuable second-round pick wisely, potentially on a tight end, and then come back in later rounds to secure a linebacker who can contribute immediately or develop into a long-term starter. And there are names in this class that fit that exact mold. Players who are productive, aggressive, and instinctive. Guys who can step into the system, learn behind veterans, and eventually take over. Some of them are tackling machines. Others have a knack for creating turnovers, forcing fumbles, jumping routes, making game-changing plays. And that's something this defense can always use more of. There are also prospects with unique physical profiles, some bigger, more versatile defenders who can play multiple roles, others smaller but incredibly fast and instinctive, capable of navigating through traffic and making plays in tight spaces. That diversity gives the Broncos options. It means they can tailor their draft approach based on how the board falls, instead of being locked into one specific plan. And that flexibility is exactly what good teams use to stay ahead. At the same time, there's a clear understanding that this team doesn't need a superstar at every position. It needs the right pieces to complete the puzzle. And that's why this draft feels so important. Because the Broncos are no longer rebuilding, they are refining. They are adding the final layers to a roster that is already strong, already competitive, and now just needs a few more key elements to truly take that next step. And this is where the Broncos can truly separate themselves from the rest of the league, because this decision is not just about filling a gap. It's about maximizing a championship window that is quietly opening right in front of us. When you look at the roster right now, there's no panic. There's no desperation. That alone already puts Denver in a completely different category compared to previous years. This is a team that can afford to think strategically, not react emotionally. And that's exactly why the tight end position is starting to feel like the key to everything. Because imagine this offense with another reliable weapon in the middle of the field. Someone who can create mismatches, who can help in the red zone, who can take pressure off the wide receivers and open up even more space across the board. That kind of addition doesn't just improve the offense, it unlocks it. And if the Broncos truly believe they can find starting-level linebacker talent later in the draft, which all signs are pointing to, then the smartest move becomes clear. You invest early where the drop-off is steeper, and you wait where the depth is strongest. That's how smart teams draft. Because reaching early for a linebacker when you know there's value in rounds 3, 4, even 5, that's how you lose opportunities. And right now, Denver cannot afford to miss on an opportunity like this, not with how well this roster is shaping up. At the same time, there's another layer to this that fans need to think about: the future. At linebacker, there are already concerns about long-term stability, age, injuries, depth. It's all part of the equation. So even if the Broncos wait until later rounds, they're not just drafting for today. They're drafting for what this defense will look like 2 or 3 years from now. That's why some of these prospects are so intriguing. You're talking about players who produce turnovers, who read the game at a high level, who bring physicality but also intelligence. Some are leaders, captains, tone setters, the kind of presence every great defense needs. And when you can get that type of player outside the early rounds, that's where real value is created. And let's not forget, this coaching staff has shown they know how to develop talent. So even if the Broncos select a linebacker who isn't a finished product, there's confidence that he can grow into the role. That's a luxury you only have when your team is already stable. Meanwhile, the offensive side is where you can take a swing. That's where you can be aggressive, because adding the right tight end could be the difference between a good offense and a truly dangerous one. And when you combine that with everything we've already talked about, the addition of a dynamic playmaker, the efficiency in spread formations, the growing confidence within the team, it starts to paint a very clear picture. The Broncos are building an identity, an offense that can stretch the field, create mismatches, and adapt week to week. A defense that relies on depth, intelligence, and physicality. And a front office that is finally operating with clarity and purpose. This is not random anymore. This is calculated. And that's why this draft feels so important, not because the Broncos need to fix something broken, but because they have the chance to elevate something that's already working. So now everything comes down to execution. Will they stick to the plan and trust the depth of this draft class? Will they resist the temptation to reach? Will they make the move that completes this roster instead of complicating it? Because the more you analyze this situation, the more it feels like the Broncos are sitting in one of the most powerful positions in the entire league right now, not because they have to make a move, but because they get to choose the perfect move. That's a completely different kind of pressure. Because when you're forced to draft out of desperation, mistakes happen. But when you're drafting from a position of strength, that's when you build something sustainable. That's when you find those hidden gems, those players who don't just fill a role, they elevate the entire system. And everything keeps pointing back to patience. Patience at linebacker, precision at tight end. Because the reality is, if the Broncos reach too early for a linebacker, they risk passing on a difference maker offensively. And in today's NFL, where offensive efficiency can define your entire season, that's a risk you don't want to take. But if they trust the board, if they let the draft come to them, that's where things can get really interesting. Imagine this scenario. The Broncos land a tight end in the second round who immediately becomes a reliable target, someone who can move the chains, dominate in the red zone, and create mismatches against linebackers and safeties. Now suddenly, the offense becomes even more balanced, even more unpredictable. Then, a couple rounds later, they add a linebacker who brings energy, tackling, and playmaking ability. Maybe not a headline name on day one, but a player who grows into the role, who develops within the system, and eventually becomes a cornerstone of the defense. That's how great drafts are built. Not just one big pick, but multiple smart ones. And let's not overlook something else, competition. Because adding a young linebacker into that room doesn't just provide depth. It pushes everyone. It creates urgency. It raises the level of play across the entire unit. And that's exactly what you want if you're trying to build a defense that can hold up over a long, demanding season. At the same time, the offense continues to evolve. More weapons, more versatility, more options for the coaching staff to get creative. And when you combine that with the confidence that's already building internally, that's when you start to feel like this team is not just preparing for a season, it's preparing for a run. A real one. And Broncos fans